Morning, everyone. Call this meeting to order on this March 17, 2026. And I'm going to ask Supervisor Campbell to lead us in the pledge.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks, Supervisor.
And happy St. Patty's Day.
Oh, yeah,
Some
that's
of you
right,
are-
today.
Got your
Oh.
green on it. I got a little sliver in there. I'm all right.
Get this box over here next to me. Okay, we will move into our next item of business, call to the public. Anybody out there want to address, state your name and title, please?
Yes, sir. And Mr. Chairman, our timer's down because my computer just shut off, so I'll use my phone.
Perfect.
3-minute timer.
My name is Christopher Rodriguez. I'd like to bring to call two issues. One is the zoning change ordinance that was brought up to the board last week. I feel that the board didn't go into deep dive into what is actually being changed. Example, multi-residence / A, B, C, D, just to a multi-residence. I don't think that they received enough information to make a good decision whether or not it's going to benefit the public. Case in point, if somebody is going from an MRC to a multi, they're not presenting to the county as to how many units they're going to put on the land, or whether or not they're going to have 2 wells or stuff like that. So I don't think the board was informed enough with the information to make a good solid decision. Second thing that I'd like to bring up, which comes into that, is the Desert Valley LLC change from an RU36 to an MRC. I don't know if any of you have been out there at 4:30 in the morning when people are coming out of Valley View, but over the last 5 years, there's been several wrecks there. I feel that the apartment complex that's going in, the plans were not given to the county to show exactly what is being built and how it's going to impact Greenlee County's services. And what I mean by services, the other day it took the fire department 40 minutes to get out to the Clifton Fire, to get out to the fire in Duncan. There was an emergency issue out by the golf course. It took the ambulance service about 30 minutes to get out there. And it's not that they don't want to get there, it's just that the resources are being drained because they're already dealing with other things. I feel that the plans were not presented to the board to show exactly what's going to go on with that property. I have nothing against somebody making a livelihood, but I think when you're going to have an apartment complex where there are that many people, case in point, where is the fire suppression system? Does the county require an apartment complex to have an internal sprinkler system? The persons next door were talking about where, in fact, is going to be the leach field because they don't want it going onto their property. Case in point, there was 30 feet in between, they measured 30 feet in between their property where their well is and where the proposed septic system will go, the first one. So again, I feel that not enough information has been given to the Board of Supervisors to make that decision. As a matter of fact, it wasn't unanimous. There was a 7-8 vote on one member voting nay on it because of the fact that they still had, in my opinion, I think he felt that he didn't have enough information. The builder did have a little schematic, but it wasn't presented at that time. So at any given time again, and then the people living across the way, they're saying, now my view is obscured. Right now it's a 2-story complex. What if the guy changes his mind and wants to put a 3-story? Is there anything in place to stop him from doing that? I'll end with one comment that the chairperson did state at the end. He stated, we are here to make sure that they are following, the water with the leaching provisions that are in place, that it's not their responsibility to really monitor this type of situation. I think it is the board's fiduciary responsibility to make sure that the public is protected at all times. If I'm not saying go against building these monstrosities, I'm just saying that if they're going to do it, where's the traffic study? There was a little person that got hit a couple years ago, right down by Gimme's. What are these apartment complexes going to do when the persons are on 7 days off and they're just lingering right there in the parking lot? A lot of them stay on their phone. Is the traffic going to come out? Marathon truckers just go through that little corridor right there at 75 miles an hour, trying to go back to pick up another load to bring back. So it's not just one little issue for that area, it's several. And I just think that it should be looked into a little bit further.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Rodriguez. Okay, anyone else? All to the public? Hearing none, we'll move into our next item.
I've got one. I want to make sure everybody else had their chance. On behalf of our assessor, Joanne Cathcart, she asked that it be announced that the circus is coming on Sunday, April 19th in Clifton at the old baseball field. Show times are at 2 p.m. and 4:30 p.m. and tickets are available for purchase, both the Board of Supervisors office, cash only, adults 14 and child 18. I believe this is being sponsored by the Greenlee County Chamber of Commerce. And that's, she was speaking in her capacity as the commerce officer of some kind.
Okay, thank you, Derek. All right, anybody else? Okay, hearing none, then we'll move into our next item of business, Public Health Service District. The Board of Supervisors will convene as the Board of Directors of the Greeley County Public Health Service District and will reconvene as the Board of Supervisors following consideration of this next item being the consent agenda. I entertain for motion.
I move that we approve the consent agenda as listed.
I second that motion.
The motion has been made and second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Ayes have it, so ordered. We will now reconvene as the Board of Supervisors and move into our next item of business, Flood Control District. The Board of Supervisors will convene as the Board of Directors of the Greeley County Flood Control District and will reconvene as the Board of Supervisors following consideration of this following item, consent agenda. I entertain for motion.
I move that we approve the consent agenda as listed.
I second that motion.
Motion has been made and second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Ayes have it, so ordered. Okay, we will now reconvene as the Board of Supervisors and we will move into our next item of business. Public hearing, a request by Desert Valley LLC to change the zoning district of a portion of parcel number 300-54-069 from RU-36, rural minimum lot area 36 acres, to MR-C, multiple household minimum lot area per dwelling unit 1,500 square feet. Commission voted 7 to 8 to the
7 of 8.
7 of 8, I'm sorry.
No,
to-
that's okay. That's-
To the Board of Supervisors' favorability, and vote was not unanimous. I entertain for motion to go into public hearing.
I move that we adjourn into a public hearing.
I second that motion.
Motion has been made and second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Ayes have it, so ordered. We are now in public hearing.
We want Hayden to,
Hayden?
No,
It's Hayden will follow. Yeah, the
Yeah.
public. Anybody else, anybody out there from the public want to address this issue?
Would you like me to restate what I stated earlier now?
I think it might be appropriate to simply say, ask that your comments be included in the public hearing.
Yeah, sure. Again, it's not that I'm choosing to go after Desert Valley in their trying to make it a better place. I just feel that there hasn't been enough studies, traffic studies done, as well as the water situation, plus the way that they presented their plans to the county. The little schematic that they made up just right before the meeting didn't tell the county that they are also looking at building 4 more buildings on that one particular area. I don't think that a fire suppression system was put in for any permitting, if anything was permitted. I feel that because Greeley County resources are already taxed trying to service York Valley, Duncan, Sheldon, as well as Verde Lee, that it's going to pull away from the patrolmen as well as any ambulance service that is needed at that time. Case in point also with the school that has several bus stops along that route where Desert Valley is. A traffic study has not been done because of the fact that you have truckers that are going in both directions, and even though the bus puts out their stop signs, I've seen several cars lock their brakes up 3 or 4 vehicles behind. There's a bus stop right there at Gimme's, and then further down the way, right before the one trailer park, they stop there again. A lot of times people coming down off of the hill from the golf course don't see that there's a bus stopped there, and a couple of times they've blown through it, but other times they've had to really push on their brakes hard. Again, it has nothing to do with being against somebody trying to make their livelihood. I just feel that they should have presented more to the public as to how this is going to impact them. It's currently a 6-unit place. Even if you simply put 2 cars per that 6 units, all of a sudden you got 12 cars that are coming out of that one little turnoff onto Highway 70. Case in point we'll hear it here in a little bit, the Montoya place, they had to jump through hoops to get their new ramp put in place with the Arizona Department of Transportation. That little ramp that they have currently going on to the public is not going to be able to handle that much traffic turning off and on all the time. So again, you're going to look at potentially putting in, having to permit with the Arizona Department of Transportation to get a new driveway put in. Whether or not that's going to happen immediately, you don't know. And my time's up. Thank you much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you very much.
Rodriguez. All right, anybody else? Okay, well then we'll adjourn from public hearing, and we'll go into our next item of business. Hayden Foy, Planning and Zoning Planner 2. The floor is yours on the same subject.
Yes, so I'm happy to answer any questions. I know that the meeting that took place, I got the notes and stuff from that, so there was a lot of discussion there. But happy to answer any questions that you have. One little note I did want to make, they did talk about the zoning ordinances at the meeting. However, those have been available for the public to read and have an opinion on for over a year. So we've put it out. We've done everything that we need to do to notify the public and give everybody time for input on those. So it wasn't a quick decision that we made. We did everything that we needed to there. So that was kind of, I just wanted to let you know that we had done that, and it was available on our county website for public input for more than a year, because I put it up originally when my son was born. So he's 16 months now. So it's been up for a while. So it wasn't something that we were trying to rush through or anything like that. We simply want to make sure that we're putting notices out correctly and things like that. So it didn't make it onto this meeting, but it will probably be on another meeting for you guys. So, but as far as Desert Valley, happy to answer any questions you have, anything like that. I know that there are concerns about various things in the area, but what we have jurisdiction over, is it the highest and the best use of the land? It's a site-built apartment that will provide housing for somebody that's not transitional, things like that. So our office didn't have any, I don't want to say issue with it, but it did not cause any, it was okay in our regard, I guess you could say. So
Ron?
Go ahead. Just real quick, so based on the information that we received, we know that planning and zoning, did approve it. It was,
Right.
seven out of the 8.
Yeah.
Approved it, so it wasn't unanimous by 1. But it's three separate units, correct? The 3 separate duplexes? Is that
So what we got originally and what he has put in for is the one that's existing, but I do know it's a portion of the land he's wanting to do. So he's not wanting to do the whole, it's like a 30-acre parcel. He's wanting to do the front half that's on towards the highway. Not even half, I think it's like 9 acres maybe right there on the parcel, but I believe that he does want to put more in the future. But he had submitted plans to us for his unit, and he did put in a build permit for the 1 unit, so if he puts more in, it'll just require more permits for that.
another permit?
Yeah.
And another approval through planning and zoning?
No, because it'll be on the area that is already zoned MRC and can handle that.
Right.
Yeah, for that density. So,
Another quick,
Go
ask a
ahead.
quick question?
Sure.
Another question that was brought up was about the septic tanks and affecting the water. But if I'm not mistaken, that is not answered by planning and zoning. That's answered by our health department. Is that correct?
correct. If anything goes in the county, the septic on-site wastewater system is governed by the state of Arizona. So they have to get that approved through the health department who implements that. So there is an oversight for the wastewater, and then there is oversight for the well through Arizona Department of Water Resources. So all that is approved and mitigated through the health department right now.
Has that been approved for the complex that's there as we speak?
I don't know for sure. Matt Bollinger or Rachel in the health department would have more information on that, but I know that Matt has been in discussions with him. I just don't know where it stands in the approval process, but he'll have to get that done through Matt before they can.
And that will have to follow the state regulations to be approved, right?
State regulations
If it
that,
doesn't meet those, then it won't be approved and they won't be able to
correct.
have people living there,
Yes,
correct?
yes.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
I have a question, Hayden, in regards to ADOT. Has ADOT, are they in the picture? Have they been notified in the situation of the increased traffic that's gonna be coming in and out of there based on what the gentleman here shared with us?
As far as I know, ADOT would be involved with that. I haven't spoken with them directly. I know Reed Larson has some contacts with them, and we have had people in the past that have been had to get the turnout approved by ADOT. So I am not very well versed in ADOT and roads, but I know that they have the jurisdiction over exactly what the concern there was. Road study wise, things like that would be ADOT, but I assume they would be involved.
Mr. Chairman, on that front, just like septic permitting and so forth is a separate agency that regulates that, likewise, access to state highways is under the purview of, we can't control that.
No, I understand that. I'm just curious based on what was shared, because I know in the past, there's been other folks that have built right off the side of the road there, and they've gone through some.
Correct. It
You
is
know.
one of the most rigorous review processes and sometimes expensive processes out there. However, Rodriguez, I apologize. He does point out that those kinds of things do impact our housing density, where the density impacts our traffic corridors and so forth. We have traditionally, in the planning, zoning, and the board, not emphasized that part of the analysis, and that's primarily because our growth it tends to be fairly small units that don't have a great impact on traffic. But where in this case we may leave a gap, ADOT will certainly fill that gap. The county's in a similar process right now with respect to our fairgrounds in Duncan, and our interaction with them is very much focused on additional traffic entering the highway and so forth. I think Mr. Rodriguez's concerns are well placed. And our experience has been, even to our own frustration somewhat, that ADOT is a pretty aggressive watchdog on that.
Okay. May I ask just one last question on that same subject, is that, the presenter at the planning and zoning, did they indicate anything about them having a conversation already with ADOT over this?
So I wasn't at the meeting, unfortunately, and Reed's not here to talk about it either. But it's definitely something we could tell him he needs to make sure he gets in touch with them. It's not necessarily a stipulation in our office for them to get in touch with them because, like Derek said, we let the ADOT has that oversight and they're very strict and they keep an eye on things. But as far as I know, the person that's putting them in has built before. So I'm sure he's aware of those processes, but I wasn't there to say specifically that came up.
Mr.
So-
Chairman, I was there and there wasn't too much discussion over the entrance and exit, but it was brought up. But I don't believe that question was asked of the builder, if I remember correctly, right, Mr. Rodriguez?
He wasn't asked that. He did say that he felt that the current road would handle the traffic. However, we know these things are 60 to 70 years old, and especially that one. I do have to say that they did try to, when they were bringing material in, they took the fence down, and ADOT had been working by, and they made them close it up really fast and said, no, you have to come in this way. So they are aware of ADOT's rules and regulations, especially since they had already seen what was going on with Mr. Montoya's property just down the road. So, but it was not, a question wasn't posed to them whether or not they had contacted ADOT.
But ADOT does have back to Hayden, they do have the final oversight on that, right?
Right. Yeah.
It's ADOT.
Exactly.
And they do
I
not
know from
hesitate
past-
for a second to shut, I mean, like I say, close the fence back up.
Yeah,
It's
they-
you
they
that
closed
had to
the
deal with
fence-
them.
They
Yeah.
had to close the fence back up, and then they had to start bringing in the material from the other side. They were just,
Yeah.
the straight shot right from the highway when they were bringing in the materials, but ADOT didn't like that.
Okay, well, I just think that as a courtesy, I think that gentleman should be advised that he really needs to
Right.
touch base with ADOT on what he's planning to do there and so on and so forth before he goes any further with his project. You know, I mean, time is of the essence and so is money when you're planning a project just like that and all of a sudden ADOT is right in the middle of it and puts the brakes on it or whatever. But I just thought I just would make that comment, okay?
Yeah, and Reed and I can make sure, because Reed is in talks with the builder a lot, and I'll make sure that that's passed on to Reed, that he needs to give him that. At least you need to get in touch with ADOT and make sure this is all safe here.
Okay. Go ahead,
But
Ron.
just comment, but at the end of the day, we're looking at highest and best usage of that land. We're looking at putting in rooftops. We're looking at growth for the community. Looking at individuals being able to, build on their property. As long as they follow our policies, and then they're gonna go through different steps. They're gonna go through different health, through the health department, to ensure that their wastewater isn't encroaching on a well that's adjacent to it. We're kind of limited to, we can't say we support growth and and all that, and then try to hold somebody from being able to do that. So,
Yeah, and I like to say these things don't happen in a vacuum. I know that growth and change is scary, but there are checkpoints along the way that, as relaxed and laid back as Greenlee County is, there's the state agencies that keep the foundation of that safety going, and that are going to prevent you from having a neighbor that just has no septic system, things like that. So it's not as nerve-wracking as changes of growth is. It doesn't happen in a vacuum, and it is something that there is oversight on it. As much as we feel like there's not, there is. So
Okay. Anyone else? Anything?
I don't have any more I just want to make sure the water and the septic were, and the entrance were regulated by the proper agencies.
Okay, well, with everything that has been said, here, I lost my place here. My computer just went to sleep on me. Okay, well, with everything that has been said, is there anything else that anyone out there in the audience might want to say? If not, I entertain for a motion on this subject.
I move that we approve of the request by Desert Valley LLC to change the zoning district of a portion of parcel number 300-54-069 from RU 36 to MRC, as presented.
I second that motion.
Motion has been made in second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I call for vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Ayes have it, so ordered.
Thank you.
Unanimously. Okay, so now we will move into our next item of business. Derek Rapier, County Administrator, the floor is yours on this first item.
Periodically, I'm approached, and I think members of the board are approached, different people suggest that perhaps a building or a facility should be named after somebody. At our February county managers meeting, there's a section where it's county roundtable, and I simply threw out to my colleagues a question: how do you guys go about doing this? It was an interesting interaction. The initial response was a very awkward silence. It is sort of a public forum and so forth, and eventually somebody asked, who wants to name something? And followed not long after, and why? Why do they want to name something? And so it started a discussion, got a lot of feedback from folks. As near as I can tell, no county has a policy on this. But this is although we have no written policy, this would be a policy shift because we've never named something in the county, one of our facilities, for somebody that I'm aware of anyway. And so I thought before we headed that direction, staff would really like some direction from you. I'm going to take a little bit of a lighthearted approach to some of the concerns that were raised with me in that meeting. And most of those were good friends and colleagues of mine who pulled me aside after me and says, hey, let me tell you some of our thoughts and what's happened and so forth. So with that, these are illustrations of potential concerns. Anybody know why we are called Greenlee County?
Mason Greenlee?
Mason Greenlee. And you'll notice the footnotes. You look this up and there's a Wikipedia entrance. It doesn't give a citation. The Arizona Commerce Authority, I think, went to Wikipedia to fill out their page because there's no citation given. It's the same sentence. Grokopedia, who knows what that is? I Googled and Grokopedia came up. They actually said that it was on March 10th, 1909 that the county was formed. And then they go back into it was a fellow named Mason Greenlee. And that they cite the Arizona Commerce Authority, which of course we think cites Wikipedia. And then they quoted the Society of Architectural Historians, who quotes Wikipedia. So there's circular citation. I asked Kay, who is the keeper of all historic knowledge, Kay Gale, and she said, yeah, he was a fellow. It was here. He seemed to be well liked and not disliked by anybody. They were going to name it Lincoln County. That apparently caused some concern with some people, and so they named it after Mason Greenlee, who is buried in the Ward Canyon Cemetery. But it illustrates something, and she told me a story of a relative of her sister. That was her sister's father-in-law, who's named Sam Bolich. The Bolich family was very prominent in the Bisbee area. He was serving as a Cochise County supervisor. He died in office, and so in somewhat of a reactionary mode, they were building a building in Sierra Vista where the Bolich family was unknown, and they named it the Sam Bolich Building. His grandkids did not know that there was a building named after him. they're now, apparently the building has lived out its life, and they're considering taking it down. But again, it just illustrates that you can lose your connection with history pretty quickly. By the way, if Mason Greenlee is our founding father, who's this fellow and why is he on our seal?
He's a,
I want to ask you.
We know who he is,
Yeah.
but
We're gonna
it's
start that.
yeah, but it's simply, you know, and we believe, I don't know, I'm not a historian, but we believe he wandered through our area on his search for the 7 cities of Cibola, and he likely did. But it's an interesting that we are Greenlee County named for a somewhat obscure, very nice man that no one disliked, and Mr. Coronado ends up on our county seal. I don't know where this phrase came from. You can make some people happy all the time and all the people happy some of the time, but you can never make all the people happy all of the time. Thank you. This is my first foray into AI-generated nonsense.
There's a lot of it out there.
There's a lot of it out there. You'll see that my redesign actually puts the BI and the CE on the front of the column that's about 15 feet away from the building. But you can imagine, with the divisiveness in our country right now, half of the country would love the one on the left and half of the country would love the one on the right. But there's a challenge, and that is that one never knows exactly how naming, how it ages, if you will. Does anybody know who McHale is?
No.
Austin Adams shared with me an article, which I will confess I didn't read, that tells us that McHale came wandering through Greenlee County at one point, hunting and fishing. You can find why it's McHale. It's Pop McHale. He at one time coached every athletic team at the U of A. And apparently when they went over to lose to Occidental College in Los Angeles, a Los Angeles Times writer said that the men fought like wildcats, and that stuck. So we have a fellow who is clearly legendary in the 1914 to 1957 range, and they were fierce fighters, and so we are now the Arizona Wildcats and the McHale Center. So who are Lute and Bobby Olson? Well, we're not that far removed. We know who they are. And since the building was already named after McHale, the floor is now named after Lute and Bobby. What is not clear is why they have to share the floor with so many other people. Naming has become both memorial and commercial. ASU apparently doesn't have any basketball coaches that are legendary, so their naming honor goes to the highest bidder. There is currently an attempt to renovate. I don't know. By the time they're done, they may blow it up and start over. I don't know. But my guess is
Frank Kush Field, right?
that's true.
Yeah.
I should have found
Right.
Frank Kush Field, and I think conversely, U of A's field doesn't have a name, does it?
no.
Yeah.
think
So
so.
there you go.
It's what we're known for, you know, it's the ASU football,
ASU football.
U of A basketball.
There you go. And naming rights, which I suspect when they remodel this place, somebody will get to pay for the remodel and put their name on it. You may remember this episode. It was quite famous. She decided to give away cars to everybody in the audience that day. But there's a real question you start naming is where do you stop? And you have a building, you have a floor, you then name it the Tommy Lloyd, North Basketball Rim. I mean, there should be some limits at some point. One of the things I heard from one of my colleagues is that it has become in their county a bit district centric. So if Bianca, the supervisor of District 1, gets something named after somebody that's important to her, I in District 2 want something named after someone who's important to me. And they start to run out of facilities and buildings, and some of these are very territorial, and maybe don't have the overall lasting, I guess, like say aging. Can anybody name these 3 locations? Now there's a hint, you can tell where they're at. You've all been there.
DuPont?
Middle one's,
Philadelphia.
the White House.
It is indeed.
The one on the right is Philadelphia,
Philadelphia, yeah.
Paul Revere, I think.
Excellent. They are all not. They are all right there in Washington, D.C., within walking distance of the White House. You're right. The one in the middle is General Lafayette. It looks like he took his hat off and let an American flag come out of his head. The fellow on the left is Admiral McPherson, a Union admiral during the Union Navy. And the one on the far right is Brigadier General Farragut. Farragut Square, McPherson Square, Lafayette Square. They all rode horses apparently back then, and whether you're an admiral or a general. The names are very familiar. There's a subway stop at Farragut North and Farragut South, but the connection to who they were honoring has been lost largely to time. These are big enough. You also notice that poor McPherson, this picture, that's a seagull sitting on top of his head. The connection of why they were named has been lost, except if you Google and enter a history buff. One of the things that several of the counties mention is some sort of test of time, if you will. So to get into the baseball, there's two ways to get in. The Baseball Writers Association of America uses these criteria. You'll notice that you have to have been retired for at least 5 years, but your playing days have to have been in that window of 15 to 5 years. And some of your 10 years, you had to play at least 10 years in the majors, and some of those 10 years had to fall within that 5 to 15 window. Seems a little technical, but it's a way to sort of allow time to put in perspective one player's performance against the history of performance. You may remember there was a fellow once named Bird Fittrich, I think his name. He was this quirky, very tall, lanky pitcher in the late 70s, early 80s that had one spectacular year. I think he won 30 games. And that was his 1 year. And he was spectacular, but he didn't make the Hall of Fame. Interestingly enough, Bo Jackson did not make either the Hall of Fame for Major League Baseball or the NFL. NFL, one of the things they say is the Hall of Fame itself receives nominations, but they do not make them. So they have a fairly extensive way of how they go about taking nominations for the Hall of Fame. Any fan, you could write in and say, I think Marcus Bell should be in the Hall of Fame. Why? Because he was from our neck of the woods. Yeah. You have to have been retired for 5 years. Coaches have to have been out of the game for 1 year. I'm not sure why that is. Maybe it's because they retire much older. And I don't know what a contributor is, but you can nominate a contributor. I know that Supervisor Campbell is a contributor. I've seen his office. The Cardinals are well represented there. I could write in and nominate him to be a Hall of Famer.
Thank you.
There you go.
Big stars.
The test of time is not always, and sometimes it's the circumstance. So the John F. Kennedy Memorial Center for Performing Arts, JFK was assassinated on November 22nd of 63. A mere 3 months later, the Kennedy Center, which was already under construction, had already been approved and funded, was renamed the Kennedy Center at the proposition of then President Lyndon B. Johnson. So this length of time thing is not a hard and fast rule, nor is any policy in that regard. But I had to go looking for this. I was not aware of when it was named. I knew why it was named, but there you go. That is the pre-change face of the Kennedy Center for Performing Arts. Mojave County, dead or alive. So when I was visiting my colleague in Mojave County, they had been naming buildings for some time. There was a building, and I forget what it was. It may have been their Justice Center, but they had named it after a fellow in their history whose name I believe was Johnson. Now I may be wrong on that, but he told me there was a fellow who'd been gone long, and they honored him by naming this building after him. He was long gone. Most people had forgotten who he was, and along came a new elected official with the same last name, Johnson. the community assumed that they had named the building for this new person, and that they wondered why that guy and not anybody else. So it didn't do him any favors, and it didn't do the county any favors. So they have now reverted back to no names on any buildings. They have a justice center, they have a justice court, they have an annex or a administrative building, but they're all titled by their function rather than by names. And that was something, and I asked Mr. Elters for any policies. We don't have one, it's informal. We just had this and a couple of other, you'll notice my my attempts at AI also glitched on the arts. It somehow made it on the front of the column as well. Point being is that things change, and they've gone back to simply just naming buildings for their function. There is no statute or regulation governing naming of buildings. You can do, this is a policy the board can pursue as it wishes, but before we sort of take a turn in how we've done things, we wanted to simply walk through and consider the lived experiences of some of our sister counties. There are some solid reasons, I think, for naming and memorializing something. One is the recognition of extraordinary contribution. Sometimes people just do things that should be remembered, and their place in history, whether it's locally or state or national, should be remembered. There's a recognition of long and loyal service. Sometimes simply being part of the policy process, for example, for a very long period of time, you leave a fingerprint that should be recognized. You can ensure that an individual whose service isn't forgotten. Like I say, the longer you get away from that person's life, particularly in the case of the Bolich building, the family itself has pretty much removed from the Bisbee area. They're not there anymore. And so that will become more tenuous over time. And then it can certainly bring attention to a cause or a special community focus, and it can promote altruism, volunteerism, or community-minded focus for someone who's been exemplary in that regard. We do have the Hector Redes Educational Building, so this is not unheard of. And Hector served on this board for a very long time, and even longer on the school board in Morenci. He is one of those that left his fingerprint that will be indelibly there for a very, very long time. It's typically done by resolution. This is my mock-up resolution. You'd simply say we're going to name the whatever facility for John Doe. We would call out the building or describe it as best as we could. Probably add a whereas provision that explains why this is important, what the contribution was to whichever, community or sub-community it was. And then, you would then adopt it as a resolution. It could be proposed by any of you. If a constituent were to approach you and say, we would like such and such facility named after my grandfather or my grandmother, they could do that as well. Like I said, there's no protocol, and I'm going to strongly suggest that we don't write a written policy, because this board may feel one way, and a board 5 years, 10 years from now may feel differently. Like I say, more than anything else, I wanted to walk us through some of the considerations you might want to think about as these questions come up. But that's it. Like I say, I was surprised at the tepid response when I first raised the question in the meeting, and then as we had some of the side conversations, they had each in their county had something in their history where naming didn't go as they thought it might. And so with that, that's all I have. You can certainly take action if you wish to, but I mostly wanted to simply put us on the same thought process. And I'll stand for questions as you wish.
Any questions?
Mr. Chairman, just, no, I'm glad that you brought up the school, because Hector, I mean, he served the, Morenci School for 36 years as a board member, and so that was an easy decision to recognize him when we were building the new, that building, and then after that, then we added on and added Metcalf, Metcalf Elementary. But I wonder if the schools have any type of policy, I mean, whether that's through ASBA or what. I wonder if there is a defined policy there that, because I get that we would want to try to follow something consistent, and what we do now, or, is the same that might be done in 20 years, by somebody else, but.
I did not check on that, but I'll follow up and see if there's any with the Associated School Board
Because schools
model
are being named all
policy
the time, you know, for,
after somebody.
yeah,
Yes.
for somebody.
My wife attended BC Elementary and Pister Junior High. We give her a hard time about that all the time. I don't know who these people were, but it was a bad combination.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm curious.
and so I will check the schools. There may be a model policy with the towns as well. I know in the county communities, as near as I can tell, there's not a policy or model policy out
Yeah.
there. But yes, I can do that research.
It's definitely good to have something brought up, you know, that,
Right.
that defines that process.
And for staff, like I say, this would be a policy shift, even though we don't have a written policy. And that is I mean, that's right in your wheelhouse, policy setting, and we're happy to follow your policy directives and give you as much staff support as we can to get there. But just thought we should think it through.
We have a comment from the audience.
That's sort of fair. Did you check with ADOT on this? Because
They-
the Rose Mofford
That's true.
Memorial, you know, it might already be in place. That's the one that comes to mind. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. I know that, for example, just recently, there have been several attempts to name roads and or other places after Charlie Kirk.
Right.
Those are mostly originating through the legislature, and in some cases, some town councils have entertained those kinds of things. That's a great example of somebody who's clearly made I about said a splash, but that's not respectful enough. I mean, he clearly has had an impact. How that stands the test of time, how it ages, his impact, I think it's too early to tell. But there's clearly a lot of motion right now to try and memorialize Mr. Kirk and his contributions to America, and so.
But again, in today's climate, 50% would love it,
Yeah,
50% would
50%
hate it.
wouldn't.
Yes, it might be
Yeah.
the Joe Biden, Donald Trump, Kennedy Center.
Kind of the same thing, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, so,
Yes,
Good, that's
I'll
good
do some
information,
research
though.
and see if I can find any model policies out there.
You got direction.
Okay.
Okay, good. We'll go into item B.
All right, and that is okay. And Renee's going to bump me in the right direction if I get off track on any of this stuff. He can help me figure out what else we need to visit about. But during our recent audit, there were some weaknesses found that some is practice and other is policy. Auditors, what they tend to do is compare our practice against established policies. Those policies can show up in statute. They can show up in, for example, the Uniform Accounting Manual for Arizona Counties, the UMAC, and they can also show up in our own policies. And so some of what they found, and it's been a rigorous audit process. I mean, they're digging deep and looking at a lot of things. So some of the things they found were, for example, if I had taken a legislator to lunch and I didn't write down who was at the meeting and what the point was of the meeting on a receipt or a written statement, they said, hey, your policy requires that. Other things, they weighted against something we don't have. We don't have a policy on point. And so what we'd like to propose to you is to give some consideration and direction. If you'd like us to develop these policies, we will, but they will address some of our audit concerns. The first is a government relations policy. For many years, county had employed a lobbyist, and it was primarily for a single issue that we eventually resolved without a county tuition. Once that issue was resolved, our other legislative agenda typically tends to be pretty slim. It's mostly defensive, and so we didn't see the need to continue to hire a paid lobbyist. But that doesn't mean we don't have contact with our legislators. Each of you individually, sometimes we collectively, sometimes myself or other members of the county, other elected officials will meet with legislators. One of the issues they raised was a meal that myself and then Supervisor Richard Lunt had out of the legislative session with Senator David Gowan. And they asked, one, why didn't he use his per diem at that meal? It was actually out of session, so he didn't have per diem. And the other was, what is the public purpose? What was the public purpose? Well, this was during the time frame that we were still working through out-of-county tuition, a Southern Arizona Sports Authority, and one other one that came up.
Four Fry, maybe.
It wasn't For Fry, it was the Mutual Link timeframe. So there were significant pieces of legislation. Interestingly, as we got to looking at this, there are in the UMAC, which is how we govern our accounting and finance statements, there is a list of object codes, which means here's how you code this in your budget for lobbying activities. And it includes meals and drinks, it includes entertainment, and it includes flowers even. So apparently we could send flowers. But we don't have a policy on any of that. And so they questioned, one, what's the public purpose? Both the Secretary of State as well as the Auditor General do have some guidelines on public purpose. So our proposal would be to develop a policy that would explicitly allow for the county to expend nominal amounts of money in our efforts to influence legislative decisions. That may be a meal, that may be, like I say, other things. There are guidelines that if you spend over a certain amount, it has to be reported. But taking a legislator for a sandwich near the Capitol is considered a nominal amount. I realize there are places in Phoenix you can get a sandwich for not a nominal amount. What we would simply ask is, would you like us to develop this policy? This would govern my activities, it would govern your activities, other electeds, and other key staff members who may find themselves in a situation where they need to visit with a legislator about something, or a congressman or congressman's staff.
Go ahead.
Is there something in the, because we follow state on travel policies, on mileage reimbursement, on per diem, things like that. Is there something on the state level that we would implement that would
We would model
duplicate that?
We would model a policy after the guidelines in the Secretary of State's office for designated government public lobbyists,
Yeah.
as well as some of the stuff out of the Auditor General's office. Yes, so it's not a model policy, but we would develop it from those guidelines.
Because I think we had made that change, on our travel reimbursement or mileage reimbursement, and rather than us determine our own number, what that is, we would just say that we were in line with the state rate.
Yes.
So I think that might be the best.
I know that other counties are working on this development as well, because this has come up in other audits in other counties. I don't know that there's a model policy, but one can certainly be developed and derived from those state agencies. But yeah, I mean, like I say, we would certainly not carve this up and just make it out of thin air. We would tie it to established policies and regulations. Interestingly, when we had a lobbyist, he would take people to lunch and he would always pick up the bill. We paid him, he bought the lunch. That wasn't a concern. So it seems a bit artificial, but it's something they raised in this audit cycle. So I know as I visit with, again, my colleagues around the state, they likewise have such arrangements. Others have done lunches. Some have been, Gila County, for example, created a fund that they pay to their administrator. It's his money that counts for his retirement, but it is expected that he will use that to pick up the tab on such meals and those kind of things. So people, and we're yet to see how the Auditor General feels about that. It's a fairly, last couple of years attempt to work with this. With that, then I'll tie this and try to develop a policy to present to you that'll be tied to those state agencies, if that's the board's directive.
That's fine.
Okay.
One last question. We're not being redundant, are we? We're not doing the work over again twice, are we?
We don't have a policy at all like this, and so when the Auditor General tries to come back and tie this back to a policy, there is none.
Okay.
And so,
So you'll write it to where it's conducive to Greenlee County too also, right?
correct. There's no question, and our recent history shows that our ability to influence legislators and legislation is critical. We receive requests all the time from CSA, from NACO, to contact our legislators. I mean, influencing how legislative, and what happens, as you know, is that legislation is often conceived in the minds of Maricopa County legislators with no thought as to how that might play out in the hinterlands out here. And we have become, along with our other rural colleagues, important voices on helping them understand if you do this to solve this problem, you're going to create another problem out here. So there's no question that there's a reason for us to do that. And sometimes that will involve some expense.
Just want to make sure that we're being audited to audit items we're in agreement with, rather than auditing ourselves into a corner, so.
That's a good
Good.
point. And the next one is one where it was me who this came up with. But you're right, I want to make sure that we don't tailor good policy into bad policy simply to make the auditors happy.
Yep.
The second one is professional fees. And this came up in the context, so I am licensed in Arizona and New Mexico. For a very, very brief time in my career, about a year, I practiced on both sides of the line in private practice. However, I have used that New Mexico state license repeatedly, although infrequently, on behalf of the county. One that Supervisor Gomez and Campbell will recall is when we had exited out of the Arizona and New Mexico Coalition of Counties, and we were strongly lobbied to join back in. Well, one of the concerns they had was a difference in law between Arizona and New Mexico governing how such associations manage liability. And their law could not be reconciled with Arizona's law. There were some other factual situations going on at the time that the board declined to re-enter that organization. But those kinds of things come up from time to time. So I've used my New Mexico license. I've not represented the county in court over there. Again, our two longer standing members will recall that we had a flood damage, and we currently own a bridge that is in New Mexico. Our road, their state, our bridge. My law license, as well as our engineer at the time, and I don't know what his license status was, but it wouldn't just be in the case of a lawyer. It could be our engineer, it could be other professional licenses. They were concerned that my annual dues are not an appropriate public expense. Again, we didn't have a policy on that specifically. I have not paid this year's law license for New Mexico out of county funds. They had no problem with my law license for Arizona, but they had a difficult time. And when I tried to explain to them, they how would you describe it, Renee? Unreceptive.
You got shut down.
They heard him.
They listened. I don't know if
Yeah,
they heard.
yeah,
I felt unseen. But nevertheless, we don't have a policy on that, and so I think in that regard, that's my situation. My law license may be unique. Our engineer, our health professionals, other licensed people in the county may not be as unique. This is one that if we don't want to develop this policy, I will continue to pay my law licenses going forward in New Mexico out of my own pocket. But if you'd like, I can play around and develop a policy on this that would be broader than one person, not me. This would be for anybody who may be licensed in another state. If you'd like to leave it as is, we can do that too.
Desire.
I'd like to come up with something, and maybe we could look at it.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
And,
Okay. All right.
you know, when you're, as you said, when you've moved on, we'll have that in place. Perhaps if we face this again,
Yes.
I think we may potentially do. You just never know when it's going to come up again, and would already have it in place for the audit point.
We have, as I said, over the years,
If approved.
had infrequent but not insignificant interactions with our neighbors in New Mexico, both Catron and Grant County, as well as Hidalgo County. So,
And we may go years without interfacing them with them, or we may go a time where we have a situation where we have to interface with them a whole lot, so.
okay. I'll develop something. If you're comfortable with it, great. If not, we can tweak it or scrap it. Again, this is a policy that you would need to approve. The other one that we came up to identify is some clarification regarding some of our travel policies. Two in particular. One was when there are meals purchased, I know Chairman Gomez has done this, but when there are meals purchased, for example, with a legislator or something like that, the auditor said, well, you can't spend more than what you get for lunch for per diem. What we were actually doing was not a travel meal, it was a lobbying meal. And that might have taken place with a legislator, might have taken place with somebody, a regulator, state land, ADEQ, somebody that we're simply trying to work through an issue on. And we're not trying to influence, we're simply hungry at the middle of the day, so we go out and one of us may purchase the meal. And so we felt there could be good reason to clarify that there are meals. So if, for example, I were to go and take a legislator to lunch, I would not charge the per diem for that meal as well. I would bill that separately as a lobbying meal in that regard. And so we thought that it'd be good to perhaps provide some clarification. And again, Renee, if I'm off on this, please correct me, but we thought there'd be some value in clarifying meals that are outside of the travel per diem rates. That would be one half of it. Is that accurate to describe it? The other is we ran into a concern. Our policy with respect to conferences says that you can stay at the hotel at the conference rate, and then it has in capital letters, within reason. That is undefined. So we had two instances where county employees attended a conference, and the conference rate at that facility was higher than some surrounding properties. They were very specific circumstances that made sense at the time, but when the auditors came back and looked at it, they said, that seems unreasonable. I got quite chafed that their decisions about what is reasonable was somehow better than our decisions about what is reasonable. I tried to walk them through the value of being at the conference location, the side conversations, the ability to be with the group that you're trying to develop policy with and so forth. Again, we were listened to but not heard or seen. And again, our policy is unclear on it. It simply says within reason. It doesn't say who decides what's reasonable or give any guidelines. Some guidelines, for example, might be the distance of the other lodging facilities to the conference. Am I walking down a mile down the street in Chicago where I don't know where anything's at, whether it's a good neighborhood, bad neighborhood, or anything else? I think that should be something.
Or is it February?
Or is it February? Exactly.
Or in July in Phoenix.
You're right.
Yeah, I mean, those kind of things. Or is it a place where you're unfamiliar and staying at the conference hotel in a neighborhood? There are places where some of the best hotels in some large cities are also in the worst neighborhoods. And so not knowing that.
Philadelphia was one.
Philadelphia, there you go. So I think giving some context and some suggested non-exhaustive list of what might be considered would be helpful. The other is that I think this could be shifted to those who are approving. So for example, if an elected official is sending one of their employees to a conference someplace, Supervisor Warren and I attended with the sheriff a conference in Reno, Nevada. It was at a resort. I think the next nearest place was almost a mile away. It's kind of an isolated resort, and so do we want to send our people walking that mile back and forth? Those are things. But I think in the case of the sheriff, for example, if he's sending people to that conference, he should be the one that says, "Here's why I think it's reasonable. I approve it," because it's difficult to second guess an armchair quarterback why that decision was made. So what we propose to do is clarify our policies on meals and particularly with conference rate hotels and develop some guidelines on that, if you'd like us to.
I like the within reason, but
Yeah.
I'd like to give a little meat on the bones what reason looks like, because I was a bit irritated when a fellow whom I'd never met, who had never been here, told us that we were unreasonable on the two instances they cited. I disagreed with him. I gave him my reasons, and again, they were unmoved. So But if we define it too heavily, we can pare it back as the board is comfortable. Again, this is policy making, this is your ball field, and we will make suggestions, but follow your direction on what we do.
Well, I think putting that policy together and us reviewing it and seeing what makes sense, we can, before we adopt it.
Yeah,
Definitely
possibly
do that.
tweak it if we have to.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because, I mean, as an example with NACO, right, in DC, you know, if we didn't stay where, you know, right there adjacent, we would miss a whole lot of, you know, things if we had to run back or whatever, because there, you know, there's things going on all day long. And if you're able to get to the elevator and run to the room or whatever you got to do, you know what I mean, and then get back, it's just much more efficient. Especially with transportation around there, whether that's taxi or Ubers or whatever. If, you know, you might stay a place a mile down the road, save a few bucks on the hotel, but then
And you pay
know,
for the Uber and the.
yeah, the transportation
transportation.
back and forth, and we've walked a mile from
Correct.
DuPont or whatever in February, and luckily it wasn't, you know, snowing, but
Case in point, you'll recall several years back, the overflow hotels were the Omni and the Marriott Wortman, which are up across Rock Creek Canyon, about a half a mile, 3/4 of a mile away. And one year that we were there, it was blizzard snow. And Richard and I we tried to get an Uber, no one would come and get us. And so we're walking through the blizzard down to the Hilton where all the things were at. And you're right, if you forgot something, you're up a creek. And so, yeah, that was a good example of where reasonable, particularly in that circumstance, was to be at the location.
so yeah, that would be included in my reasoning of within reason, you know. So
Okay. And I'll do my best to try and incorporate those realities into a policy that is both flexible and guidance enough to help us be reasonable in that regard. And I believe that is all I have for that. We will develop those policies and come back and present them to you.
sounds
Okay.
good.
Okay, so we're not taking action, we're just giving you direction to get that done.
Yep.
Okay,
Yes.
so you're done, right, Derek?
On that one, yes.
Okay. So now we move into our next item of business.
Mr. Holguin.
Mr. Holguin is sitting in for, or stepping in for Mr. Manus in Public Works Roads Manager.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And our first item here for discussion and action is regarding permission to go out for bids.
Morning, board members. Mike Hogan, Roads Assistant Manager. It's that time of the year again. We're starting our chip seal project this year. The list I gave you is all the roads we'll be working on. We'll be in the Duncan area. We'll also be in the fairgrounds. We got some roads we got to do in there. We'll be starting in the Franklin Road, ending in McCarty Trail that way. You have the tonnage for the oil there at the bottom. You have the tonnage for the chips there towards the bottom, the total. Item A, requesting permission to go out for bid for purchase 3/8 fractured chips for the 2026 chip seal.
Okay,
We're looking at roughly around 2,800, 3,000 tons of chips.
Mr. Chairman.
go ahead, Lance.
Next question. And Derek, I'll just ask this question to you. I mean, do we have to go through these, since this is just permission to go out for bid, and these are all included in the roads, right? You need chip seal, you need oil, you need to stripe them afterwards. Can we approve those as one motion, or do we have to do?
You could. I think if the motion is worded such that you mention all three items specifically, a single motion could cover that.
Okay.
One thing I wanted to point out is that we are also doing more than we usually do in the Duncan area. We have been approached by and are still in discussions with the town of Duncan to do one of their roads, I think it is,
3 of the roads.
3 of their roads.
Yes, sir.
They will pay for everything. We simply would provide the labor and be reimbursed for both equipment and labor. One of those roads is a patchwork of county and city That's the road that goes out to the elementary school,
Yes.
Chaparral and.
That Campbell Road, that's the road they named after me.
Yes.
That's
place-
those
That's exactly the road.
I know exactly the
It's
road.
the Ron Campbell and Kennedy Center Road.
And they
That's it.
named a blue after me. I mean, gee, Campbell Blue.
You were big before you were.
There's a place for Ron.
So
so-
off this list, what?
the roads in the red down at the bottom. Those are the town of Duncans.
Campbell and
Yes, sir.
Chaparral?
Yes.
Okay.
And we need to develop, there's still some details to be worked out on preparation.
Yes.
About who will conduct that work and so forth, but I wanted to be clear that we will include that. We will be reimbursed 100%. And then, of course, we're going to do some chip sealing in and around the fairgrounds that will formalize the roads that have kind of informally been used during the project.
We started on the new road. We're gonna get that finished, and that will be chip sealed, and the new entrance also will be chip sealed, and hopefully some parking lot areas and around.
Okay.
And again, this is just permission to go out to bid. Once the bids are pulled together, they'll come back to us.
Yes.
And we'll approve the decision as to who we go with on all three of these. And those could be different.
Also the back page is just the roads we're gonna stripe. It's not all of them. It's only 1, 2, 3, 4, like 6 of them, I believe.
Okay.
Okay.
And in regards to chips, you guys make a lot of your chips. Are you guys,
We buy our chips.
all of them?
Yes.
Oh, I thought you made some of them. Okay. All right.
So do you want me to read off these so you guys can approve? Are you guys good?
No, we're
We're
good.
good.
Okay.
We're good.
Good.
Okay, well, I entertain for motion.
So I move that we approve going out for bids for the listed roads for the Greenlee County Road pavement project.
Should we list, the 3/8 fractured chips, the oil emulsion, and the striping?
I think they should, a single motion mention all three items.
You want to do that again, Bill?
So I move that we approve the Greenlee County Road paved roads project.
Let me back up if I might.
Yep.
The motion would be best put as I move that we give permission to go out for bid for 3/8 fractured chips, oil, and materials to stripe roads for the 2026 chip seal project.
Here comes my favorite part. So moved.
So moved.
Yeah, well.
So moved, yes.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Holguin.
Was it
Okay,
moved and seconded
Been
and
moved and-
voted upon?
Second.
motion has been made in second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Ayes have it, so ordered. Thank you, Mr. Holguin. Well done. Okay.
Yeah, we didn't even miss David Manus. Let him know that.
Yeah. Pass the word along.
I sure won't. Smart man. Okay. So we'll move into our next item is business. Derek Rapier, County Administrator.
Thank you. There's been some developments with respect to secure rural schools and payment in lieu of taxes, and I wanted to update the board and let you know where we're at on this. Renee and I were involved in a telephone call yesterday with Vanessa Fielder from CSA, who is sort of the point on this issue as these federal funds interact with county roads and so forth. By way of quick review, and I know that some of this we've been talking about for years, but for Supervisor Wern, a quick trounce through history. The Secure Rural Schools, or SRS, was first enacted about 26 years ago, and it was in response to dwindling National Forest Service fees. In Greenlee County specifically, there was a fairly healthy timber industry in the northern part of our county, primarily due to regulations for the endangered Mexican spotted owl, and then later some plant species and minnows and other things. Timber almost came to a complete stop for many, many years in Greenlee County. The old National Forest Service fees were revenue that was derived as a percentage or a portion of timber sales. So when these would let out, the local jurisdiction where the timber was cut would get a cut of that money. The purpose was the same, and that was to provide some money to help subsidize where we would normally tax, in our case with a property tax, that land to provide, emergency response services, roads and so forth. Some of those timber sales came back. When that timber sale dropped, this was led by the state of Oregon. In fact, their entire school system is supported from these fees. Of course, in Oregon, you got trees everywhere. But as those timber cutting, if theirs was the northern spotted owl, it cut back on that. So SRS was the brainchild of Oregon and wholeheartedly endorsed by all Western states. And so this was essentially a substitute for National Forest Service. It is formula driven, and it is primarily derived from activity on the Forest Service. It is provided under federal law for roads and or schools. It's not clear that one has to be one or the other. Arizona law requires that it be used for roads and schools, but there's no minimum percentage given as to how much goes to roads and how much goes to schools. By way of history, we have typically withheld in Greeley County about $300,000 every year to use in our road program. And that was primarily because there was a period of time when PILT was not fully funded. So payment in lieu of taxes, again, it starts back in 1976, about the time most of the major federal public land laws came into existence. And again, recognizing that local jurisdictions provide services to these federal public lands, this was again intended to help pay as if they were paying property or sales tax, as in some states, to allow us to provide those services to those lands. And in Greeley County, we do a fair amount. We, particularly during the fall during hunting season, the sheriff sends people up there, our search and rescue are up there. We obviously do a lot of maintenance on roads, some of which belong to the Forest Service, and we have agreements with them because a lot of our citizens and our first responders go up there and do that work. It's distributed to counties based on a formula that is set in statute. However, Congress gets to decide every year. Occasionally they do it in blocks of 3 or 5 years, but they get to decide how much of that is funded. Typically, if it's not fully funded, then it is reduced on a pro rata basis. And so with that, we then, and there was a period of time coinciding with the early stages of SRS where we were not getting full PILT funded, and so the county made the decision at that time to take the $300,000 and use it on our roads. The interaction of these two is that for every dollar that the county uses in SRS funds for roads as opposed to schools, our PILT distribution is reduced dollar for dollar. So if we take $300,000, our PILT payment is $300,000 less. And this came into sort of sharp relief this last year. SRS was not reauthorized for federal fiscal year 24. As a result, when we received our PILT payment, it was just about $300,000 more than we were expecting and more than we usually get. And so Renee and I began this discussion several months ago as to, how did that happen and where do we go with it? Again, we began enlisting Vanessa Fielder at CSA to work us through this decision-making process. And so for fiscal year 24, which we received in June of 25, that's when we received that. We got $50,000 in forest fees, which were the old timber cutting sales. As you recall, there's now starting to cut some small diameter timber with on the forefront. So we got a trickle, we got a little bit of, and it was around 50,000, give or take, and our PILT was reduced by that much. Secure Rural Schools has now been reauthorized retroactively for 24, 25, and prospectively for 26. So SRS is fully funded. PILT is currently fully funded for fiscal year 25, which we will typically receive in June of this year. It may come earlier, but it typically arrives last second or third week of June, right towards the end. In our discussions with Vanessa, it was suggested that we may be better off, and our schools would be better off, if we kept just a minimal nominal amount for roads, so we complied with Arizona law, and pass the rest on to schools. Our suggestion is that we move to that model. Our schools are better helped, and our PILT will rise with our reduced use of SRS funds on roads. The one hitch in this giddy up is that PILT has not been fully funded for fiscal year 26 in the federal fiscal year, nor for years going forward. I think, I read last night that there was a call for, to contact our congressman. Our congressman's on board. We're not worried about Representative Siscomani. But there was a call to go out to fully fund that. That is an annual call we get from PILT. Sometimes we get a set your hair on fire call from NACO. This was not that. And so I'm confident that they will get there. I think that it'll fully fund. But in a climate where revenues through the big beautiful bill have reduced, there's always an appetite to find places to save. And it is incumbent upon us to help them understand this is not an earmark. This is not, for us, discretionary spending. As you'll recall from our budget process, this is a significant revenue stream for us. But I feel like PILT is probably going to be okay. The other question that I didn't finish that last sentence. PILT has not been fully funded through FY26. Sorry for the, I'm sorry you can call me out. Yeah. Working too late at night. And so our initial proposal is that we reduce our SRS distribution to the county to a minimal amount, maybe $1,000, and then distribute the rest of it to schools. We want to, one, get some assurances that PILT looks like it's going to be fully funded, and two, we would like to also understand the timing. So there's typically a 2-year delay from when SRS is calculated until we receive the check. It's actually not a full 2 years, but it's, and that's partly because the federal fiscal year ends in October and our fiscal year ends in June. So that's partly timing, and partly the way they calculate it, it doesn't show up. So what we don't want to do, for example, is give all the money to the schools and then we end up with a deficit in our road fund that we can't make up. PILT money is treated as general fund money, just like our property taxes are. We could use it once it's received. It essentially goes into our general fund pot, and we can use it however we wish. And it's very easy to use that for roads. On the back end, it makes the accounting a little easier, and on the front end, if there's a dollar for dollar bump in our PILT, we're not losing any dollars. But we would like to research with Vanessa and make sure we have the timing correct and get some sense of PILT's funding going forward. But with that, our proposal is going to be probably sooner rather than later to come back, issue the distribution letter that we used to do in the past, but the formula is going to look very, very different than what we've done.
Okay.
So,
All right, do it.
okay.
So we're not looking for any action today, we're just going to.
No, I wanted to let you know where we were likely to come back and recommend that we go.
I think in the long run, we're better off, our odds of getting PILT funds are greater than SRS lasting. But maybe
Yes.
I'm wrong there, maybe I'm wrong.
You are not wrong. You speak as though you've been in that seat for 20 years, because
Yeah.
SRS is a constant fight.
Right. Yeah.
And I don't know why SRS went through so easily this time, but
Because that's the way legislation is made. It's sort of like sausage. Things get thrown in to get the bill passed.
yeah.
Surprise, surprise.
Surprise, surprise. And of course, we know the DHS funding right now is on hold. It's causing all kinds of fits. Don't go on spring break by an airport. But those kinds of negotiations and backroom arm wrestling go on all of the time. Sometimes it simply comes down to, look, I need a dozen or 15 votes from the western states, and PILTA and SRS is an easy way to get there. But that's, like I say, that's the way such things are done. So,
Keep us posted.
okay. I didn't want to spring this on you in the middle of as we get more involved in our budget. I want to let you know that what we were looking at. And that's all I have on that agenda item.
Okay. right, we'll move into our next item of business. Again, Derek, Bianca.
You're gonna be so sick and tired of
Glad
me.
Derek brought his water bottle
The
today.
floor is yours on county and state budget and legislative issues,
He's
Derek.
got another one down the road here too. So.
You're gonna have revolt in the chambers here. People are gonna say, "Get out of here." This is a chart, of course, you're all familiar with. We'll look first at our county half-cent sales tax revenue. You'll see that our number's up. Actually, the second highest receipt we've had in the year. This is much more, somewhat volatile, simply because this is influenced by how many large sodas that people buy at the Circle K, but more importantly, it's influenced by what the mine purchases. And so as they purchase, you know, anything from copiers to whatever, this typically does not include, for example, truck beds that we see going through. Those are designated to go to where they came from, typically over in the Mesa or Casa Grande area. But nevertheless, a lot of personal property purchased in mine affects our half-cent sales tax. Interestingly, there is a proposal. It appears to be dead for this year, but I wouldn't be surprised if it comes back. There are two kinds of businesses that are affected greatly by the cost of doing the TPT or transaction privilege tax or sales tax. There's the Amazons of the world, and if you'll notice, when you buy something, you put in your zip code, and Amazon will charge you sales tax based on where you are at, where the product will arrive. And then there's the mom and pop shops who collect sales tax where you go in and buy your Big Gulp or your TV. And then there's this group of businesses that maybe you go into I don't know, Transcendent Rock shop in Sedona, and you say, "I love that rock. Will you ship it to me at my home in Duncan?" And the system isn't equipped for that sale. It's not really an Amazon sale. Or if I go online and I say, "Oh, rock shop in Sedona, you're only in Sedona, but I want the rock in Duncan." Where do they charge that? So there's some legislation proposed that would artificially determine where the point of sale takes place. That's something we want to watch very carefully with respect to our half-cent sales tax. We've been pretty accurate on this revenue item for the last couple of years, but that could change if something like that were to take place. One of the other areas is in the grander scheme we've talked about jail and so forth. If we took, as Cochise and Graham did, to pay for their jail by way of a sales tax, it would be something like this. And so we watch this very closely, not only for current revenues, but for projected revenues, should we end up in a situation where we're paying for a jail. You'll see down here that our budget surplus on this revenue stream is only about $27,000, not quite $30,000. So we're only slightly ahead of our projected revenue for the year. We'll switch over to the state shared sales tax. You'll see that, again, our numbers are way above. Our projection was $450,000 per month. We have not gotten that low any single month this year. In fact, it looks, in many respects, like our COVID days, when our revenues were much higher than expected. There are some reasons for that, although we will never be allowed to know the particulars. Cost-cutting measures at the mine show up in our sales tax. We know, for example, that FMI's facility in Indonesia is down. That affects the world copper market. So copper prices are good and will likely hold for a time, so that gap helps contribute to our sales tax. There is a monster in the room that has come up in the last 2 weeks, and that is the cost of energy and how that will affect. That will have an effect in many aspects, but it can certainly affect the cost of production. But you'll see here that if we stay on this revenue trajectory as we have for the last 7 months, 8 months, then we would likely end up with $1.6 million over our projected revenue stream for this particular revenue stream. That combined with the county half-cent sales, we would end up 1.662 over projection. That's a good thing. It's always good to get more money than less than you projected. We can't spend that extra money, and it will accumulate in a larger cash balance. And we'll talk during our budget discussion about what some things we can do with that cash balance are that will help us both now and into the future and guard against the day that always comes when copper will not be as profitable as it is at the moment. Any of us who've lived here very long know that there are cycles. They may go longer or shorter, but the copper market is like any other commodity. It has its cycles, and where we are in good shape now, it won't always be that way. So there's some ways we can address that will help us use today's dollars to help us in the future. But for now, I wanted to kind of work through, and I would say more than anything else on this number, we need to keep an eye on energy prices. That will probably have more of an effect on anything in this revenue stream. If it were to taper off, even come back to our projected, we're still going to be ahead. And so this revenue stream has proven to be very, very good for us. Legislatively, away from our budget, there are still fights at the they have not decided on conformity. They haven't even really begun to discuss in earnest what they're going to do on conformity. The governor's made it clear this is what she would approve. The legislature's made it clear they want to approve everything. It was in the big, beautiful bill, but they have not come together on that. They are just beginning budget talks. Usually in an election year, they want to try to wrap up earlier, but the disagreements, both philosophical, political, and policy, are pretty deep. You also have a fellow who's the Senate president, who's running for Attorney General. That may not help the budget get done, because at some point he's going to pivot to campaigning. The election, the primary election, is just 3 weeks after the close of the fiscal year. There are other significant players. Representative Culloden, who is a big voice on elections, is running for Secretary of State. There are some who've already resigned to run for other offices. That kind of dynamic makes these fine negotiations kind of rough. So I told you a month ago, don't file your taxes yet. You might as well file your taxes. Who the heck knows what's going to happen? And whatever changes they make may not even be applicable till next year. So I will start my taxes. I hate it, but I will start. As far as other policies that are going through the legislature right now that are some concern, there are 2 election bills and one what they call HCR that I think has concern in the election world. And then, of course, there's the SAVE Act, which I think will likely not make it through unless the Republicans do away with the filibuster. And every story I've read says that they are unwilling to do that. That would fundamentally change elections throughout the country. It would be less of an impact in Arizona because we already require proof of citizenship for most of our stuff. Where it would impact us is that it would affect our early voting and what used to be called absentee voting, but it's early voting. We're watching that. There are two bills in the House, State House, that would also affect proof of citizenship. One says that everybody will get a state-approved ID at state expense. It doesn't necessarily address the logistics for some people, for example, living out beyond communication on the Navajo reservation. But those bills are moving forward. The HCR is the one we heard last year, which is a House Continuing Resolution, bypasses the governor, goes straight to the ballot, and that is precincts of no more than, is it 2,500 people? 2,500 people, which would, for Greeley County, greatly increase our cost of elections. We would have to find probably double or triple the number of poll workers. We would have to locate ADA and accessible voting sites for each of our precincts. And ours is tiny compared to Maricopa or Pima County. Their costs would skyrocket. And the last development in that area is that the FBI subpoenaed records from the Maricopa County election audit of 2020. We're not sure exactly what the angle is, but there seems to still be lingering concerns about that election. And those lingering concerns, whether founded or evidenced or not, are affecting election policy discussions going forward. We'll keep an eye on we just had what they call crossover week, so bills that originated the House have gone to the Senate and vice versa. 4,000 bills, never had that many. And so they're a little bit behind. They're extending some of those committees to try and get them across. But by and large, that has happened. That's where most bills die. They don't get out of one house into the other. They start popping up again in the other house. So we'll keep an eye on stuff that we thought was dead that is resurrected. There's some planning and zoning issues that we're keeping an eye on. But that's where we're at on that.
Thank you.
You done, Derek?
I'm done. Aren't you tired of it? I mean, you should say, Derek, you're done.
He's talking about accounting and politics all in one morning.
Okay, Bianca, the floor is yours. Calendar.
Not too much more going on this, the rest of the month. Tomorrow is Eco and Small Counties, and then the 19th is CSA. And that's all we have for the month of March, unless the board has more to add. April, our first board meeting, April 7th, county managers on the 10th, Eco and Small Counties on the 15th, 16th is CSA, and then our second board meeting for the month is April 21st. That's all I have for the month of April. May 5th is our first board meeting of the month. That's also the WIR conference, the 5th, and it goes through the 8th. County managers on the 15th. Our second board meeting would be on the 19th, Eco and Small Counties on the 20th, and then the 21st, Thursday, would be CSA. Our offices are closed on May 25th, Memorial Day. And that's all I have for calendar.
Do we have to talk about that WIR
But I'm
Changing
sure,
that
yeah, we need to
meeting?
make some adjustments for the board meeting. For the first meeting in May,
All right.
you guys will be at WIR.
Should we not designate a date, and if we don't need it, we don't do it, and, or what, how should we plan that?
Let's talk about it in April.
Yeah. Can we take a look at it in April and see what's coming up?
I believe our preliminary suggestions would be to shift those May meetings down a week if we need them both. And of course, this is budget season, so we may well need them both. But yeah, we knew, Bianca knew, I didn't know. She picked it up that there was a conflict on the 5th with WIR. So,
If anything, if there isn't a lot of business to discuss, we could move it into the 12th at the middle of the month.
okay.
What do you think?
Well, you also have the day after Memorial Day, which you generally don't like to have meetings those days, right?
We've been
Yeah.
this year,
Yeah, that's why.
We've
I'm saying-
adapted
we've
to it.
adapted, yeah.
That's what I'm saying, don't,
We've had, board meetings right after a holiday.
yeah, we have. We've kind of gotten in the habit too of moving it into Wednesday, but I think a better idea would be put it in the middle
Just
of the
move 'em
month.
down.
Move it up to the middle of the
12th
month.
and the 26th?
No, I'm saying
Just
possibly
one meeting on the
one
12th.
meeting-
Oh.
One meeting on the 12th,
Okay.
Depending upon business,
yeah.
right?
Okay. We're done with calendar also then?
Yes, sir. All I have.
All right. So moving to our next item of business, consent agenda. I entertain for motion on the consent agenda.
I move that we approve the consent agenda as listed.
I second that motion.
Motion has been made and second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Ayes have it, so ordered. Okay, we'll move into item number 11, supervisor reports. Anyone have anything to share?
Oh, after our last board meeting, I did attend the categories meeting. Supervisor Warren also attended that categories meeting. It was well attended, good discussion, a lot of good information shared, and again, I asked them to, provide us any details on how we might be able to assist them. And that's about all that I have.
Mr. Chairman, I was able to attend the cattle growers with Ron, and great experience for me, and learned a lot, and got to visit with concerned parties. Also had some of our state representatives there with us. Then this 2 weeks ago, Monday through Wednesday, I was able to attend with our county manager and Mr. Tony Hines to Reno for the Western States Sheriff's Convention. We had the opportunity to learn, talk to consulting groups and engineering groups about potential needs here in Greenlee County, which we'll be using in the future, which our county manager is currently working on those plans for the future of our working with our sheriff's department of working plans into our jail and into our sheriff's offices. So it was a great time to talk and to get those contacts which are needed to move this forward. That's all I have, sir.
Okay. Well, I really don't have anything, so we will probably take a 5-minute break before we get into our
Budget work session.
budget work section.
Sounds good.
We're gonna take a turn it on now. And we'll resume.
We're live.
Thank you. All right, we're into our last item of business. Derek Rapier on information and discussion and direction on budget work session.
I'm glad that showed up. It was
Yeah, I
on my
was like,
screen. It was
did you
like,
get mid-letter, you were.
it was a ghost that had vanished. We'll move through some of this fairly quickly. A lot of this is sort of some baseline setting for our budget process. It's the kind of stuff we cover about this time of year every year. Most of the answers we probably know, but they're your decisions, so we want to make sure that we are on the same page. One of the big questions is what will we do for wages, potential increases and so forth. We have made significant position adjustments over the last 2 to 3 years and targeted market adjustments for some positions. There may be a little bit of that, but by and large, we'll be looking at across the board raises as our suggestion for the board. We have typically tied this to CPI inflation rates. One of our neighboring counties also uses the Social Security inflation rate. In other words, what increase the Social Security recipient's going to get. It is in the same neighborhood. The national CPI is running at 2.4 as of the end of February. State CPI is running at 2.2. That is primarily a metropolitan measure that doesn't always translate real well out here. And the next slide, I'm going to emphasize where I think that makes the biggest impact for us. This is a chart that's on the CPI webpage. And this demonstrates in graph form how prices have risen. You'll see that the big one up there is food, and this is a rolling percentage, so at the end of March, it'll be the 12 months preceding. This is not what they call seasonally adjusted, because some prices go up. Heating oil, for example, is not an issue in the summer. In the Northeast, it's a winter issue. Here's the monster in the closet, right there. And why is that? Well, because we all know that 2 weeks and a day ago, a war began. And there are ships, hundreds of ships stuck on either side of the Strait of Hormuz. Energy prices have skyrocketed in response. If this is a fairly short-term duration conflict, then I think there's not only do prices return back, although you've probably all noticed that prices at the pump shoot up and float down. They never drop like they shoot up. So I don't expect that this would be any different. The Energy Secretary said be prepared for several weeks, maybe even a couple of months of higher prices even after the end of the conflict. But that assumes that the conflict is over in fairly short order. But that energy price shows up in the cost of food. It shows up in the cost of goods delivered. It shows up in the cost of goods on the shelf at Walmart, because you've got to get those goods from wherever they're at, dock or warehouse, to the consumer. So that energy cost filters through everything. And so that's the one area where I am concerned, and whether this looks like it will be a temporary blip, whether it's a longer problem, and should we then adjust salaries and wages to reflect that. We have tried hard, and the board has done a very good job of keeping ahead of inflation. So particularly our lowest wage earners are not hurt by the inflationary period of the post-pandemic. In fact, I think we may be the only county that was able to stay ahead of inflation. We're not prepared yet, so I on this front, it's not just the CPI we're looking at, which we could afford, but also what does energy do, and how does that filter through? How long is it persistent? Want to simply make you aware of that. I don't have a recommendation on wages yet. I think it's simply too early. Talk about health insurance. This is another area. It's not tied to energy. It's tied primarily to specialty drugs in the area. We just attended our annual health insurance pool meeting 2 weeks ago. Last year we raised the cost of health insurance went up by 4.5%. In fiscal year 24, it was only 2.7. What is driving that? fiscal year 27, we had few high-dollar claims. High-dollar claims could be significant surgeries, it could be significant diagnosis, and this is across the 6-county pool. So La Paz, Santa Cruz, Graham, Greenlee, Gila, and Apache. The other thing that began to drive up prices in a dramatic way is what they call the biologic or the specialty drugs. You've heard them. There's Humira, there's Skyrizi, there's, if you can think of a weird name that you've heard on television, it's probably a specialty drug. The industry has been very, very good at pulling demand. So across our pool, across the pool that Yavapai County belongs to, their insurance rates went up 19% this year. A lot of that's being driven by these specialty biologic drugs. And for some, for whom there was no relief at all, some of these are lifesavers. I mean, they're making changes, and you know, from everything from psoriasis to multiple sclerosis. There could be all kinds of things. But they're expensive, and they're in the early stages. Many of them are still patent protected. And so in the typical drug world, you'll have a product, one that my family uses a lot, Synthroid, is a branded thyroid medication. There's another one called, its name just left me, but levothyroxine. It is a generic form of the same drug. And so those generics have saved our pool tons of money over the years. With the specialty drugs, there is no such thing. They're developed individually, and they're biologic-based, not chemical-based. But there has been a rise in what they call biosimilars, and we'll get to that in just a second. Last year, we were told that the projected annual increase for medical costs over the next 5 years would be about 7%. We were able to stay under that curve. This year, that projection has raised to 10% per year for the next 5 years. What the industry insiders are projecting is that, again, with the cost of specialty drugs and the slower development of substitutes, we're going to see high costs on that. Some of it is with these, we are treating diseases that we couldn't treat before, and while that's very good, it also has a price tag to it. I'll talk about how we lowered that at our conference. The original projection for our health trust was a 17.2% rate increase. One huge change that we made brought that down. We made a few tweaks, but the one huge change was how we go about purchasing medications. We selected a different drug provider. The typical model is you have what they call PBMs, or prescription drug management companies, and they will go to the Skyrizis and the Humiras of the world, whoever manufactures them, Eli or Bayer, whoever, and they'll say, will you give us a rebate? So we will buy your drug off the shelf at, say, $1,000 a month, and then you will rebate us $700 of that, or $600, whatever it is. They then pass that rebate on to us 100%. One of the things that has changed that dynamic is Trump, what they call Trump Med or Trump Drugstore. And that is, he's saying, look, if you provide this same medicine to Canada or England at a fraction of the cost, then we're going to make you give us your best customer price. There are several companies that have popped up in just the last 18 months that are doing just that. And so rather going to the company and saying, give us the drug and then give us a rebate, there's something going to say, give us the drug at that price originally. And even getting it down lower. They're also, they're hiring pharmacists and doctors on staff that can do the analysis and say there's a biosimilar that will work just about the same. And they're requiring people to say, try the biosimilar first, and then we'll go to the Skyrizi or the whatever the name brand is. So we switched drug benefit providers. That alone knocked out most of that high cost. The plan still does cover GLP-1s. These are the Ozempics, the Wegovy's, but only for those who are enrolled in our diabetes prevention and management plan. One of the things we're going to want to keep an eye on is there's been increased enforcement of what they call medical parity. So if, for example, we have unlimited visits to a doctor, we can't limit how many times you see a therapist or mental health professional. But it's now starting to play backwards and say, can you cover a particular medical modality such as diabetes and not cover anything and everything else? That's still new, but I think it's going to be something we'll look for in the coming years. We also the pool adjusted deductibles and out-of-pocket max limits. That's like adjusting your deductible on your home or your car. It'll save you some money. It'll be more out of pocket. One of the upsides that no additional cost is that Blue Cross Blue Shield nationwide will now be available to us as an in-plan provider. So if you have a child going to college out of state, if there's Teladoc through the Blue Cross Blue Shield, we will drop Teladoc out and use Blue Cross Blue Shield's national network. So those will be cost savings to, I don't know what that was. That was weird. There will be cost savings throughout the plan. If we're traveling out of state, if our kids are out of state, if another dependent is out of state for whatever reason. One of the questions that comes up is you hear, and I'm just taking 2.4% because that's the national CPI, but let's say the board approves a 2.4% wage increase. The concern is often expressed, well, you're only giving me 2.4, but you're raising my insurance 8.3%. So I try to put this in dollars, and I need to check these dollars when I'm not as tired as I was last night and make sure they're accurate. But it illustrates a true point, and that is that a small shift in wages is a lot higher dollar amount than a slightly larger shift in insurance premiums. And this also illustrates that the bulk of that cost is still borne by the county. So the question on this topic is, do we want to continue the split that we currently have? We have always made sure that the county covers the bulk of it. We're required to cover at least 90%. But as costs have gone up, we've equally split the increase between employer and employees. Some of our counties in the pool, the board has eaten those additional costs. Some years, all years, hit and miss years. But we've been fairly consistent. So the direction I'd like from the board is, do you want to continue that going forward, that split? I see one head, two heads nodding. Okay, then we'll continue on that. One of the things that will affect this, I put in 8.3. I think our actual projection was 8.22, but we have become fully employed at the sheriff's office. And when you add more people to the plan, it will increase your cost to the county. So the next topic, charitable donations. Obviously, we have some that we build into our budget every year. These are the ones that primarily directly affect our most vulnerable populations, elderly, disabled, otherwise disadvantaged. We will plan on including those donations unless you tell us otherwise. But then there's a pool of other folks. Sometimes we know about them. The Arizona Supervisor Cameron, I'm talking about this morning, the Arizona Trail.
Alpine Trail.
Yes, have asked for a $1,000 donation for the last 2 to 3 years. Sometimes these pop up in the middle of the year. We didn't know about them, and we have generally tried to have the board focus on those that are aligned with county objectives, aligned with our current policies, and have some nexus to county government. And so we have created a pot, if you will, for charitable donations that we don't necessarily have designated at the time the budget's adopted. We could decrease that. We could increase it. This is one of those areas, if the budget is tight, I would recommend we decrease. It should be one of the first bees kicked out of the hive if things are tight. But at this point, our budget should be in fairly good shape.
How's it been this year based on what we had, put in that pot last year?
2 years ago, I think we had 10,000. Last year, I think we went to 20,000, if I recall. And I think we've been able to handle all of it within that 20. We're not certain.
Yeah, I mean, because
You would
there's,
remember if we were over, so
Yeah.
I think we're okay.
yeah, you guys would remember that.
If we were dramatically over, we'd remember for
I mean,
sure.
We had the Riverview Park thing. We had the Alpine Trail. We had the
We helped the
Colors of
library, didn't
Copper. We've
We
had
helped
the
the library.
library.
Helped the
we had
library.
Yeah.
Even the Christmas.
We helped the light parade
Yeah.
one year. We used to help the what was it, Color of Copper thing, we don't do that anymore. The Riverview Park was 1 year
Right.
donation. But like some of those pop up in the middle of the year.
That's
And so I think 20,000 was pretty close. We will review that. But if you'd like to stay pretty close to that, we will start with that assumption. And if it is dramatically different, then we will come back and let you know.
I think keep it the same.
I would say keep it the same, see how it
Okay.
goes.
It builds some discipline in our spending. So even if we have more money, we realize we are not the giver of last resort for every organization that has good intentions. And they really are good. I don't think people come here just asking for things for no good reason. But it does require some fiscal discipline to say, this is aligned with what we're already trying to do.
But that 20K does not include what we do for Seekis or whatever,
Correct.
and the Meals on Wheels,
Correct.
all that
For the
other
seniors.
stuff.
Yes, yeah, no, those things that directly affect our senior population or
Right.
disabled population, those are baked into our budget already,
Okay.
so. I'm not gonna suggest any changes on per diem. The state has not changed any of their rates. As Supervisor Campbell pointed out, we tag our rates to theirs in most cases. So we're retaining, we maintain the current per diem reimbursement for meals and mileage, unless you direct us otherwise. We are not tied to that. That's simply been the peg we've used.
Yeah.
Okay.
Works for me.
We all good with that?
Yep.
Capital projects. We're gonna review our tier ones, see where we got to. Reminder, a capital project by definition is a project costing $100,000 or more and with an expected useful life of 5 years or more. Parks, public works buildings, all of those fit in that definition. And we're gonna invite all elected officials and you as well to say where should we focus those dollars? We'll also give you a review on how we've done, what we've accomplished, and where we need, to do some things on the projects we're already underway. There's some other things that have come up. I don't know if any of you came into the building when we had a pipe burst. It was a very clever response. There was a bucket taped to a pipe that had a hole in the bottom with a hose that went over to a sink. What was ironic about that temporary fix was that was not the worst problem of that day. In fact, it was pretty small. It was a bad day. But we need to look, for example, and do a deep dive into our plumbing in this building, the annex building. We've talked about, and Judge Ford and I have been working. He will be here probably in our next meeting to talk about security changes. There's some IT infrastructure that needs to take place in the old courthouse so that they can actually get the bandwidth that they need. There's some security upgrades here in this building that we need to do, some lighting, some other basic things. The sheriff's office roof has become an issue that we need to address.
Sheriff's office or jail?
Jail, yeah,
Okay.
to be specific, the old jail building,
That's-
yes.
okay.
And then some of our radio communication infrastructure, we're in the process of reviewing some of that. That's repeaters, that is microwave dishes, whatever the case may be. There will need to be some upgrading on that as well. And we will try to put prices to those and work them into our capital projects discussion. And then, of course, as we get further in the budget, we'll ask you to prioritize those. We need to finish the projects we've begun and put a new emphasis. I am under the understanding, although I haven't driven by to check, that the fence at the Loma Linda Park should be going up starting today.
By the way, all the lights are off at night.
Are they still off at night?
Well, they were on 24/7.
So we're not lighting the world all the time, we're not
Now-
lighting it
now
at all?
they're
Now they're just on during the
Now
day.
they're off at night, and they're probably just on it during the day. One, you take your pick.
We want to make sure those walking during the day don't trip.
I noticed them last night when I drove in from,
Okay,
when I was coming in last night.
thank you.
Well, they're not on 24/7 anymore, so, yeah. We're getting there.
On the upside, we think we have fixed the restroom fan and light. There was a switch that had been switched permanently on, and when it's toggled the other way, it's a timer based. So we think
Going
we've
out
solved
now when
that,
the door closes.
but we may have to go out and try that just to make sure. Our lawnmower,
Go down there and test it.
I will.
that's right, our lawnmower needed new
Tires.
tires. Those have been received. They'll be put on. I think the first thing we mow is the Loma Linda ball field. So there should be some.
I'll mow the other ball field if you don't get to it.
Also, so we will go out and do it with his push mower back and forth.
Forest Wern.
I'll be down there for a month doing it, yes.
But we will do an update with you on where we're at on those capital projects. Our Public Works building, for example, is the one that we use when we're down on other things. If you've been out there recently, you've seen there's been some significant dirt work. It's actually not dirt work, it's millings from the Smelter Hill project. And those have been used around the building. There's still some on site that they have other uses for. But that's the one that we work on when we're in between other projects. But we will ask the board to, and we'll have more than one session on this so we can go through it, understand where we're at, where we need to go next. One of the things that we'll probably do is increase our capital budget. So we have approximately $5 million in our capital budget fund. We only budgeted 1.5 of that last year. And Renee and I talked about that yesterday. We may not need to increase that, but as we look at some of these repair projects, we may put more of that fund into use where we can put it in our budget. So even though we have 5, we can only use 1.5, which will be plenty for the current fiscal year, but we'll look at that as well. There are at least 3 areas where we've talked about. It's an experience, budget experience that we have not experienced very often in Green Bay County, and that is that we're in a very solid cash position right now. Renee has done some projections towards the end of the year, and it looks like our cash position will be close to what it was last year, which was $13 million, a little over 50% of our budgeted budget. There are some things on the horizon, however, that we want to consider. I'm going to cover the public safety retirement system in a second, a little bit more detail. But one is we need to be thinking about our ambulance rotation. We had initially proposed that in this purchase year, rather than purchase a new ambulance, we would take one of our old ambulances, change out the chassis, put a new car under it, if you will, a new truck, and then update the box. We may do that, and we may look at some other ambulance acquisition possibilities. But what we talked about doing is in the current fiscal year is making a budget adjustment to put some more money in our public health services district so that ambulance purchase or refurbish is pre-funded. So while we have some cash, we would use today's cash, set it aside for tomorrow's need. And like I said, I believe fiscal year 27 is when we typically go out and try and get that. There are more ambulance acquisition options than there was during the pandemic when we had the 3-year wait for an ambulance. We will go back to the company that supplied us our ambulance, that they sold us their demo. Tony and I talked about that, and we'll encourage them to have a demo and come out and show it to us, and we'll buy it on the spot again. But we want to perhaps fund in the current fiscal year an expense that would likely come up in fiscal year 27.
Do we have one in the oven right now?
We do not.
We have 2 that have arrived.
So the
One
one that we
went
waited on
back.
3 years is in service, and the one that we got when they brought the demo out is also in service.
But
So
we're due for one more,
Well,
aren't we?
that's what I'm saying.
We
we're
are
gonna
due
have
to
one in-
try and acquire one in fiscal year 27. That's our every other year rotation, so that we end up with 5 ambulances, none of them older than 10 years.
So you'll budget this year for your 27.
20.
Correct. But we would like to perhaps pre-fund that with cash we have on hand, so that we're not trying to find it in the next budget year.
And then we can go to our partners and tell them that we're doing that.
Correct. And we will look for ambulances anywhere we'll pick any tree that grows an ambulance and pick the fruit.
I know where one is, so we're,
They are difficult to come by, as we know. In fact, in our discussion with our partners, when we acquired one, literally within, I think we had an emergency meeting to approve the purchase of the one that they brought out here. We purchased that in about 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And he said, one, where did you find it and how did you get it? And we bought the demo. So, and it's working out well as far as I can tell. Our cost to put that on the road was minimal. We striped it. We added a refrigerator to it and put radios in it. and it was on the road in about 2 months from acquisition.
I'd like to stay on schedule there too, yeah.
We would too.
So we don't get into that hole again where we have 5 bad ones.
That was frankly a supply chain issue that was caused by the pandemic. We simply could not get an ambulance for 3 years. Second is flood control district. This is born out of a horror story from Gila County. You'll recall, it was about 6 months ago. They had horrific flooding. They had almost 2 or 3 inches of rain that fell and all collided right there in the Miami Globe area. Millions and tens of millions of dollars of damage. The dynamic that has made this more acute right now is that FEMA, the current administration has they get some mixed messages. One is that why are we doing emergency management at the federal level? And so there was an attempt early on to simply do away with FEMA. It then got caught up in some of the management of that particular DHS department, and so reimbursements were slow. Gila County is now in a position where their portion, in order to even qualify for federal reimbursement, is $18 million. They don't have it. They will likely be issuing a bond, a 10-year bond, to pay their half in hopes that FEMA reimburses the rest of it. But they're already $18 million in the hole on that, and they're using their credit card to pay that off for the next 10 years. They expect their annual payment on that bond will be $2.4 million. What we have talked about is, again, pre-funding some of that flood control district money out of excess general fund cash so that we can cover our disasters tend not to cost as much as theirs. The levee in Clifton has helped a great deal from big disasters. It's not to say we don't get flooded. Duncan, likewise, a lot of the damage that would have been happening 30, 40 years ago is now moved out of the flood zone. But we do have roads on the Blue that get wiped out. We've had bridges wiped out. And we're going to be increasingly under the current climate where we have to front and may have to bear the entire cost or much of the cost of that disaster repair. So one of the things we've looked at is pre-funding, putting additional general fund monies into our flood control district to be prepared against the day when the disaster hits us. It will happen. You are already aware that there are fires burning. I think our hazy skies are due to that. We're supposed to hit upper 90s this week.
Early.
It's well, in fact, I saw the other day that it's literally Phoenix hitting 105. This is a month earlier than it's ever happened, and 2 months ahead of when it usually happens. Does it persist, or do we go back to cold? Do we get a big snowstorm in the middle of May? I don't know. But we should be prepared for the forest fires and resultant flooding that takes place. So we will give you a proposal on that. The last one is what I call level setting our PSPRS actuarial unfunded liability. This is one that Supervisor Wern is not as familiar with, but we spent a lot of time over the last 5 or 6 years. That fund was at one point about 29% funded. It's a unique fund in that it's managed as a single fund, but each entity has its own fund within it. Over the course of 3 years, we put in just short of $4 million into this. We used excess unspent money from the Sheriff's Office and a couple of our other agencies. And then we used a great deal of federal COVID dollars to pay off our unfunded liability with cash. We are one of only 2 counties that did that. Most issued debt to do that at a lower interest rate. The assumed rate of return is 7.5%. That helped us a great deal. And so coming in out of 22, our unfunded liability was we were funded to 96.5%. And I'll show you that here in just a second. And our unfunded amount was only about 4%, 3.5%. In 1 year, it got out of control. And I'm sorry, I can't make this bigger. I'll try to read those numbers for you. In fiscal year 23, our unfunded actuarial liability, and that actuarial liability is different than actual true cash on hand. That is using actuarial formulas to smooth that out over a period of 15 years. But our unfunded status was $342,000. In a single year, that jumped to $681,831. And as a percentage of our total overall assets, that's not very much. In fact, it was only 4.5 or 3.3% that we didn't have funded. That was after we dumped $4 million into the fund. In 1 year, that jumped to 681, but our funded status only dropped about 3.5%. Renee and I have been kicking this around for several months now, trying to understand what took place. And I told you at a previous meeting that some of that may be due to lateral transfers. As it turns out, that's not most of Greenlee County's concern. You'll see this is slightly bigger, but that 681 jumped last year to 711,000. But you'll notice just underneath that, our funded percentage didn't change. So that's about a $30,000 jump in unfunded liability, but our percent of funding didn't change. Now, why is that possible? Primarily because market gains and other actuarial assumptions will smooth that. So one of the things that we learned just yesterday was that these actuarial assumptions are essentially like a life insurance policy. They project how long one of our retired officers is going to live. If somebody no longer collects pension because they passed away or some other reason, that will help our actuarial valuation because we're not paying that out. Likewise, if somebody lives a whole lot longer, that lowers our actuarial funded status because they keep collecting money when the actuaries thought they would die. That sounds kind of harsh, but that's the nature of actuarial calculations. Something else, if, for example, we had an officer who is rendered disabled from from something that happened while he was working, all of a sudden we can't contribute anymore and we're start to pay. So our actuarial funded status would go down in a negative way. Those are things we can't control at all. What we didn't understand as well as we should have and what we didn't predict was funding. So these two lines, the blue line represents the actuarial assumption for raises in wages. So as a baseline, they assume that wages for law enforcement officers will rise at 3.5% per year. For younger officers, their assumption is much higher because they're going to go through promotions and certifications, and across the entire system, they will get raises earlier. At the end of your career, you tend to get fewer raises. But smoothed out across the entire population, their assumption is 3.5%. What did we do? During the pandemic, we held wages flat for I think 1 or 2 years because we expected the worst and we planned for it. Very conservative. That yellow line or orange line represents pretty close to what we did. So we actually gained ground during the pandemic because we didn't give any raises. Once we found out that our revenues were stronger than expected, and once the post-pandemic inflation began to kick in a very big way, we tried to stay ahead of inflation. So you'll recall 1 year we did a combination of across-the-board percentage and an across-the-board dollar amount. What that did was protect our lowest wage earning employees against any inflationary effect at all. And then as we went up the wage chain, those at the top of the wage chain got a little bit behind inflation. Our officers tend to be on the lower end of that. Not that we're underpaid, but they're not our highest wage earners. So by having paid above the actuarial assumed increase of 3.5%, we created this gap. And we did not kick in extra cash into the system to make up for the gap. And to be candid, we did not realize this until this fiscal year as we began to understand why. And we consulted again with Vanessa. We also had I spent more of my life than I'll ever get back with PSPRS walking through why that happened. And so we're working on a model that will help us monitor this every year. Our funding policy that we adopt every year has been unchanged for 20 years. We're going to likely propose a change to it. And the change will simply be that it requires staff to go through and analyze wage changes over assumptions and recommend perhaps annual additional cash contributions. Now, one of the things that's gonna happen is, as you are all aware, if you're in the market at all, that this past 12 months has been a very, very good market year, save the last 2 weeks. But I think, again, if the conflict ends, I think we'll see some of those gains come back. We will see that in 2 years in our contribution rates, because we will have some gains out of our control that will help our actuarial funded status. Actuaries smooth losses and gains over a 7-year period so that you don't have the erratic ups and downs you see in the market. But where we need to put in some work and where we will recommend changes is that we, as we know we're increasing wages above the assumption, then we need to kick in some cash as we go so that this does not continue to grow more and more divergent. Does that make sense? We will recommend that this year, probably in the neighborhood of $300,000. That will help bring us back. We believe that along with market gains, will bring us closer to that 96.5% funded ratio. 94 is not bad, but I don't want it to drop to 92 and then 89 and then 87 and we're in trouble again. But if you followed that, as we go back here, that's what I talk about by level setting our PSPRS. And so we're gonna likely, during the current fiscal year, ask that the board fund PSPRS like we did during those 2 years when we paid it off, with a much smaller amount, probably in the neighborhood of 300,000, not 1.9, not 1.5, anything like that. So, and we will prepare that for you.
Stay on top of that so it doesn't get to that.
So we don't get in
Right,
that
right,
deep of a
right.
hole again. Correct.
All right, I have a question. David mentioned, do you have one or the other going right? Hotspot will go in the IT world. Ron, you said you were potentially working on something. Would the funding be there to just have an ambulance on standby? I know there, especially going pandemic, routers and switches, we could not get enough of them during that. Therefore, FMI, we had a minimum of 5% on the shelf ready to go. Is that feasible under this budget? Just have, I know. Just
It's a great question, and actually, for years leading up to the pandemic, we did just that. We would budget and then usually acquire the ambulance within the same budget year, and we were buying one every other year, so that we were on a constant rotation. Because we don't use large volumes, we don't need 100 ambulances, we only need 5. And because of our budget restrictions, you'll recall, as we were waiting on that ambulance for 3 years, every year we had to approve that amount in our new budget. And so it is kind of the same, but not the same. Particularly when the purchase is approved at the beginning of the budget year, but the acquisition doesn't occur till the end or into the next or subsequent fiscal year. That is easing. Emergency vehicles are becoming easier to come by, including ambulances. They're still extremely expensive, but like I say, pre-planning for that, so at least the cash half of that is already in the bank, ready to spend. That's how we shorten that shelf stock question that you've raised, and stay within our annualized budgeting process. But that would be, it's a very valid question.
And the assumption is that they're all running at that time, you know what I mean?
Correct.
That's the difficulty.
Good running order, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was really a big issue, as we got that 3-year delay, is our older ambulances begin to age and show their wear.
So I think we're gonna work our way through that over these, getting 5 budgeted in. We have, we'll have 3 new ones. So we won't fall into that aging category again.
Even the IT infrastructure changes, fiber, trenchers are hard to come by these years. I'm not too sure how the county's working on that, but, just, IT alone, we can't try to budget for the 5 years, but yet it changes so rapidly, so fast.
What we budget for 5 years is out of date by the time the 5 years gets here, right? So.
And the difference with ambulances is they are not only slow to produce, but they're slow to acquire. And that's, I suppose that's been the frustration, is the difference, or the time delta between the purchase decision and the acquisition act.
Yes.
And that's where the frustration came in. But like I say, I think those times are shortening, and like I say, we're able to look at new acquisition options that weren't available 4 years ago when we had the big delay. But from a budgeting funding perspective, we would like to sort of buy that before it becomes available, so that the money's set aside. So, and that's what I have at this point. I appreciate your direction. Some of these I know are a little premature and undeveloped. A lot of that is because there are some significant economic spike activity that we all hope, for reasons that go well beyond budgets, they are short-lived, successful, and in our rearview mirror very quickly. This board has been excellent at taking conservative approach to budgeting so that we don't find ourselves in an elongated economic disruptor like a war, and we're not prepared. So I appreciate the board's approach to that. We will develop some of these concepts in our subsequent budget meetings. Renee and I are working on this almost daily. When Austin returns from his time off, we will all be working on that constantly. The other one area that we're going to look at, and Bianca and I discussed this briefly yesterday, is we want to be well-funded in our elections. This will be another hotly contested, very contentious race, but because there are both state and federal changes that may take place, we need to be prepared to implement those if should they occur.
And we can't pass another additional budget for something that might cost us more, so.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So, anyway, that's all I have on that. I appreciate
Do
it.
you have, or do you have dates on coming up?
Coming budget sessions?
Yeah,
Don't, but we'll get those to you right away,
all right.
okay? And we'll work on that between now and our next meeting, so that we can lay that
Dinner
out.
time,
All right.
dinner time.
Dinner time.
Good.
Yeah, I didn't talk about a policy on that, but they don't like that either.
You serve dinner, I'm just talking that time
Oh,
of the
okay.
day.
Good, good. I'm afraid the days of cheeseburgers may be behind us.
Well, we can donate, so.
Okay, there you go.
All right, sounds good. Okay, I guess we're ready. You guys have anything else?
Nope, nothing else
You
for
wanna
me.
No,
say?
sir.
Okay, well, this meeting's adjourned.